whether it's dark. Uh-oh. Wait for lights. There we go. Okay. That should be right. Hopefully it is. Okay. I don't know why I can't see it, but all right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming and for welcoming in Banned Books Week 2025, a thing that we should not need but need more than ever. Before we get going, my name is Alex and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the bookstore. And one thing that means is that I get to think about stuff like Banned Books Week, and also it means that I get to talk to people like today's guest, Tori Gellman, who is a teen librarian at Public Libraries of Brookline, and is going to chat to me about this topic. Can you tell me about yourself, Tori?
Yeah, so my name is Tori. I'm, like Alex said, the teen librarian at the Public Library of Brookline. I'm at the Brookline Village location, which is next to Town Hall in Brookline. I'm the only dedicated teen services person, and I work with folks in grades 8 through 12, and do a lot of collection development, programming, civic engagement, and this event ties directly into that.
Mm-hmm. So Massachusetts is not what you would think of as a place where book banning is a huge issue. We think of ourselves as being kind of safe from that kind of thing. Do you feel that that's actually true?
Interesting question. Well, I'm from Texas originally, so I've definitely seen, it's not even like more severe, but the expanse of what book banning can look like definitely differs depending on your region, but I do think we think of ourselves as being really insulated here, and even before I was in this role, I just started in Brookline a year ago, and I was in a very small town library on the South Shore, and this is a very real issue there, and I think we'll talk about it, but ALA, they constantly, the American Library Association is constantly talking about how a lot of censorship goes unreported, so even though I think this year was the third highest number of individual titles being targeted in the recorded history of Banned Books Week, it's probably a lot more than we even know because so many attempts at censorship aren't being reported in that way.
Yeah, I was reading on the ALA's website, which by the way, the two best resources that I have found, which also link to some other great resources when you're talking about banned books, are the American Library Association website and PEN America, both of which do a lot of intensive tracking of book banning and book challenges. PEN America keeps, as far as it knows, a complete list of individual challenges and bans, which numbers in, I think, over 4,000 so far this year. And they have as complete a list as they can, and they keep it updated with what the specific challenges and the outcome of it when they find out what the outcome is.
It's really cool too over the last, I mean it's not really cool because it's devastating.
Yeah, it's a bad situation, but there are people doing good numbers work.
Thank you, yes. They have a very interactive index now of those titles that you can like export into a spreadsheet, filter through things based on not necessarily the content of the ban, but where it was banned, what kind of groups banned it. You can see these sort of mass attempts at censorship from political groups, government entities. So it's really interesting and kind of breaks down this very huge issue into more digestible pieces.
Yeah, and when you're starting to look at those numbers, and again, both of these organizations are great at showing you the broader picture as well as the minutia, you start to realize who's actually making these challenges and what their tactics are. I'm sure you know a lot about that. Could you talk to what it's looking like these days? What's happening?
Yeah, so it's very largely these sort of political pressure groups. I heard mention Moms for Liberty earlier, and even like government officials, administrations of school boards. These it's not individual people, and it's not really people who are even reading these books in full. It's these mass strategic bans of identities. We're banning books, but what we're really trying to do is erase people's stories and experiences.
Yeah, massively the books that are, and if you go around the store, you'll see posted to various ends of bookcases some facts that I have found about book bans in the current moment and their sources. And you'll see a list of the top 10 most banned books of the last year of the 2023-2024 school year, and almost all of them, Ellen Hopkins is mostly there because she talks a lot about drugs, sex, and violence, and any book by Ellen Hopkins will be on the list. But mostly what's being censored is LGBTQ identities and people of color. And that is very, very consistent. And also any kind of discussion of sexuality aimed appropriately and safely to children. When it comes to these efforts, nothing is considered appropriate or safe. And so really useful information is being taken out of the hands of kids who need that developmentally.
Well, on that note too, PEN America's report that they just put out, I think like 2 days ago, that I brought with me because
Oh yes, thank you for bringing, I like that you printed it. I think that's nice.
Yes, analog life. So yeah, it's called The Normalization of Book Banning, banned in the USA 2024 to 2025. So it's actually, they have a very up-to-date current list of the nearly 23,000 instances of books banned in U.S. public schools from 2021 to 2025, so over the last 5 years. And something that they really explain well is the sort of, I want to say creative, because I feel like that's not the word, but these very intentional framings of rationale for why books are being challenged and banned. So, you know, it used to be someone would just say, or a group or whoever's censoring would say, oh, it's got queer content, that's not appropriate for my kid. And now they're sort of conflating these things that they don't want children exposed to, regardless of its validity. They're conflating it with something that sounds more malicious. So basically LGBTQ plus identities, these groups are equating to sexually explicit. And that's the rationale they're giving, when in fact that's not the case.
Yeah, it's often not what's happening.
No.
Like, The Girl and the Dressmaker, for example, is frequently challenged and banned. It is a middle grade graphic novel where people wear unexpected clothing. And that is it. The unexpected clothing is also very cute, very demure. So it's just it's a deliberate massive overreach.
Yeah.
Like when these challenges are being made, nobody's confused about whether the content is actually dangerous. Like I think it's a big mistake to assume that anyone who is part of these organized groups misunderstands what they're saying or misunderstands the content of the books, because people who are doing this are very organized and they're very smart. And it just happens that what they want is very deleterious to the well-being of our communities, of our democracy, and of our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something to keep in mind too is the stories, experiences, voices, narratives that are being removed from the shelves are the ones that kids most need to see themselves in. It's by and large, like you said, marginalized communities that are under attack. And I mean, once you get into the intersectionality of those identities, like All Boys Are in Blue by George M. Johnson.
Yeah,
it's a
number
YA
one. And I think
memoir.
maybe 2 years in a row.
It's been on the list
It's
for
been on
at
the
least
top
4
10
years.
for several
Genderqueer,
years.
Maya Kobabe,
Yeah.
people don't like to have that, or Flamer. I mean, they're all, it's the same thing, and it's all fear-based.
Yeah, and you can see also in the way that, I mean, if you're well-read, you know the content of a lot of books that don't end up on these lists. And you know that it stops really being about the content and starts being more about, can we focus our attention on specific titles and push really hard against those books? And go in deep against specific books that may not even do the most of the thing that they are complaining about. But also, as you've said, like those efforts are broadening. So it's no longer 100, 200 titles, because the average before 5 years ago was 221 titles being banned or challenged per year. And that is now up to the thousands per year. And last year it dipped a little bit, but that's not actually a good thing, because what's changing is not the amount of censorship that's happening. What's changing is the mode of attack So you, I'm sure, having said some things about your previous job, what can you say about some of the sneakier ways that are probably going under the radar?
Sure. I mean, from like a public library perspective, there will be entities that will take books that they don't think should be available in the library and just not return them. They will hide them in the library, like actively make them inaccessible to people that they're aimed for. They will target programming around Banned Books Week, around any sort of DEI initiative. There will be attacks on people's, lives and identities. There are librarians who, I was on the American Library Association has a subgroup called the Rainbow Roundtable, and they put out the Rainbow Book List, which is a huge annotated bibliography that compiles exceptional literature for kids 0 to 18 with queer content. And I was on that committee for 2 years, and the second year that I was on it, they ended up having to remove like our job titles and locations from the publication because people were getting so heavily doxxed. And even, Massachusetts, you wouldn't think it, but it was happening in New England too. And I think this is kind of melding a bunch of things we said, but I think it's even more important for people who feel a little bit more, empowered, insulated, protected, like we do here in a lot of ways, to have these conversations, have these events, because, again, coming from the South, you can really lose your means of livelihood for doing that. People are relocating, changing careers. It's pretty brutal.
And I think coming to terms with this as a public is something that needs to happen and also is very difficult, because Banned Books Week, as an observation, has been around since it was started by an activist in 1982. By the time, not all, but many of the people in this audience were old enough to be aware of it, it was already something that had been around, and it was just like a yearly thing that you do. But I think because it is regularly occurring, we tend to have a lot of things that say, like, I read banned books, or, read and resist, and things like this. And these are great ideas, but I think we're so used to it that sometimes it comes at the price of realizing we have to take another step after that, because our reading habits are not actually curtailing the actions that are being taken against our ability to continue having those habits. So I think what's challenging for people is figuring out, what can I actually do besides just live my life as I choose? Which is already a great thing to do and something not everyone can do, but there have to be next steps, or else that freedom keeps being drained away.
Yeah. Would you like some next steps?
Yes,
okay?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so support your public library. Write to your government officials. ALA has some great templates of phone calls, email scripts, physical letters you can write, either saying please continue supporting your freedom to read, again, Massachusetts, or I disagree with this, you are an elected official, you represent me, here's what I would like to see, kind of a thing. Shameless plug for some events we've got going on at the library this week.
Check out the events they've got going on at the library this week.
Woo-hoo!
It's a good list, I've seen it.
Yay! So yeah, at Brookline Village Library, 361 Washington Street, we're doing Dear Banned Author postcard writing campaign, which I know is also happening a little bit here today.
So we're not writing to authors. So if you haven't stopped by the table over here yet, now if you're on the live stream, you cannot write a postcard because you are in the internet. But you can hear about this initiative. There are several bills that are currently moving through Massachusetts state legislature that are specifically designed to prevent the kind of erosions of reading rights that have happened in many other states, especially because we're not 100% protected just by our basic vibe. So the point of these bills is essentially to safeguard the ability of libraries to buy the books that serve their communities, regardless of whether any individual or group decides that they're not appropriate. And so those are in process right now. And if you want your legislators to pay attention and support those bills, you can write to them directly, or you can fill out a postcard over here. the coalition around these bills is going to be picking them up from the store. So you don't even have to address them, you don't have to mail them. All you have to do is write a couple sentences saying why it's important that you're allowed to read what you want to read, put it in the box, and they'll pick it up. If you're not actually here in the building, I do recommend checking out those bills. You can always write emails to legislators. Every voice that says this is important does actually matter, and we do have the capacity to make these bills pass. Even when you're comfortable in your situation in a given state, enshrining rights is very, very critical.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, we're not doing quite that at the library, but our ground floor is all of our youth services rooms, so we're doing a Dear Band Author postcard writing campaign from Monday through Thursday, where you can come and write a postcard to the author of your favorite band book, saying that you love their work, just kind of being a bright spot in a crappy situation. And then we're also doing band button making on Tuesday afternoon in the library, and on Wednesday it's a teens only party. We're doing with the Freedom 4 organization, which strives to civically engage teens across the United States. They provided us with these really great lawn signs that say things like Freedom 4, Freedom of, Freedom 2, and the teens are gonna write in their answers, and we're going to display them in front of the library on the lawn as sort of like a more physical outward display. And we've got displays. I brought a couple copies of some pamphlets that we have with statistics, information, commonly banned titles, and we'll just be having conversations. I love that I put out my band wagon. I turned one of the library cards into a wagon, and some of the kids are picking them up. I wrote on index cards, the title, and on the back it's why it's being challenged or banned. They're just that's ridiculous. And I said, you're correct, yes.
Yeah, well, and I think understanding that is very, very crucial. And it's good to be able to talk even to kids about this, because I think kids are very capable readers, and they have, every child has a lot to learn, we all have a lot to learn, but they're capable of understanding when something isn't quite right. And this is a situation that really pertains to them as much as, and sometimes more than anybody. So it's a good topic to bring up with the younger people in your life. I know the South Shore has been an issue. Do you experience any of those things here? Any of the sort of subtle attempts at censorship at the library?
We have had some, not any sort of formal challenges. We have had some pushback to certain content. We do a scavenger hunt in our children's room, and it'll be a little piece of paper with the different things around the room. And for Black History Month, we had Marsha P. Johnson as a figure, which a grown-up really did not like. Nothing really came of that other than it was very draining for staff to have to. She came back repeatedly to complain about this to us. Eventually that subsided, so there are little hints, but nothing surely as overt as previously.
That's good. What do you think the risk is attached to these campaigns and to book banning in general? The risk to us on a grand scale, I would say.
Erasing identities, erasing stories, succumbing to fear. I think the list goes on and on. It's everyone's individual choice what they want to expose themselves to, and to an extent what caregivers want their dependents exposed to. I say to an extent because I have some thoughts on that, but it's you don't have the right to decide that for anyone else. So I think that's the crux of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, I worry always about any society in which you can't access information, because usually when people want to curtail information, it's because there's a specific story they want to tell, and when you stop knowing that there's any other story, you start being very easy to control.
Well, that's the thing is the rationale on some books is promotes critical race theory, and you're
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
great. Sometimes it's in the title.
Yeah. Stamped, Ibrahim Kennedy, any of the iterations of that, the different adaptations for different age groups, are being censored because that's exactly right. It's a story that powers of authority don't want. No.
Yeah, the Hate You Give has been on the list for years now, just years. And it goes on and on. Let's see, that's about as much time as I set aside for this conversation. Is there any other thing that you would like to bring up while we're here?
Just really support your public libraries, support your independent bookstores, have these conversations, especially with the young people in your life. If like something doesn't feel right to you, say something about it. That's not a very see something, say something, but you know what I'm getting at. And yeah, thank you all for being here and just kicking off Fan Books Week.
Yes, keep reading, keep writing to legislators, and let's stand for freedom of speech. We like freedom of speech. Thank you, everybody. Did you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned problems on the South Shore. What's going on there?
So question was problems on the South Shore and what's going on there. It's a big question. There are, I think, the sorts of, I guess, like political groups that you would think of as being relegated to a certain region of the United States are not always relegated to those regions, and they have loud voices, mobilization efforts to censor programming, books, opportunities for kids. So it's really just an extension of things that we already know are going on, but are maybe a bit closer to home than we would like to think.
Yeah, so it's part of a broader national pattern. It just happens to be fairly local, which is a good thing to remember because that is our community. Massachusetts is small, and no matter what's going on anywhere in the state, that's part of us. And to an extent, also anything like this that's happening anywhere in the U.S., that's also us. And so I think that's one of the reasons it's useful to have those conversations here in a city where we might not expect it to be as much of an issue, because not only do we need to think outside the community of what we can walk, but anywhere within our national borders and beyond, but also anything that happens within our national borders will reach towards us at some point. And it's always good to be sort of proactive about protecting the things that make our lives worth living.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but if you're in a position where you don't feel like you're going to get pushback for saying something, that's a reason to be even louder about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, any other questions? Yes.
I have one. We talk a lot about banning books from libraries. We also live in hyper-capitalism where we've got all of our books are really controlled by 5 publishers. There's 2 national retailers that do a lot to what gets circulated. How do you deal with that as both an independent bookstore and a librarian, and that we do have we've seen people complying in advance with late night books? How do you deal with that going forward in our new environment?
Ooh, sorry. I think it depends. So one thing is, I like that you brought up that we have a very condensed publishing economy. We do have those very large publishers. The other thing to remember, which I think money makes it very hard to remember, is that there are hundreds and hundreds of small presses in this country that do absolutely remarkable work. They publish incredible voices, they publish incredible stories, they publish kinds of writing that big 5 publishers will not pick up because it's too experimental, too different, because the voices are too marginalized. There are some incredible books, and no bookstore is going to have all of those, but it's worth browsing deeply and going beyond the top bestsellers because, we as a specific store, we have books from hundreds of publishers on our shelves, and digging deep, finding publishers where you like 1 or 2 books and then following their catalogs. Not only that, so it keeps going to small presses, keeps the economy diverse, it keeps small businesses in business, And it's especially vital right now because a lot of small presses depend on federal grants and they are no longer getting those. So when you buy a book from a small press at this point, you are doing something quite active in terms of preserving the diverse ecology of our reading environment. So that's really important. And the other thing is that I think yeah, there is a degree to which, especially larger publishers, feel bound by the money, and so you know, what they publish and what they step back from can be determined by fear. But I think you'll also find that even larger publishers are proceeding with a lot of things where, yeah, if they put out this book, it will absolutely be on banned books lists, and they are still publishing those books. And when that tide turns, if it does, that will be very concerning, but I don't think it's happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, from a purchasing standpoint, like collection development side for a library, we have ordering systems that we go through. You know, Ingram, Baker, and Taylor are some of like the big names there, but they really do a good job of supplying indie sort of independent press books. Like YA, the one that keeps popping in my head is Tiny Ghost Press, is a very small, exclusively LGBTQ indie publisher, and they put out some really fantastic content that has like vibed with the teens really well. So finding those little groups and paying attention to what they are putting out. And yeah, I mean, you can always also submit requests for titles to your local public library. The teams will often have a like ballot box on my desk. They'll put something in, I'll be like, I've never heard of it, it's from a publisher I've never heard of, I don't know where they heard of it, and we get it, and it's great. So diversifying in that way, but I think I have too much more than what Alex said.
Yeah. Any other questions? Hi, yes.
Hi, I'd just like to ask, with regards to banned books, are like classic, like traditional, like literature, also an easy target for being banned? Because usually, like what I've seen is a lot of contemporary, modern stuff, but are like older books, more traditional things also targeted?
Yeah, they're definitely up there. I mean, for some reason, a Toni Morrison book, it kind of rotates which one, but is usually in the top 10.
Yeah, Beloved this year.
Is
I
it
think,
Song of Solomon last year,
Yeah.
Sula, or
Yeah.
take your pick, honestly.
Yeah, as long as she's on the list, I feel they're doing their job.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Clockwork Orange is on the top 10 this year?
It's on the top, yeah, it's like the #1 school book
Yes,
this
yes.
year. And like, that's actually, I did have a parent who complained that I didn't put it there, it was there before I got the job, but that Fight Club was in the teen room, and I was like, we have it in the teen room? I mean, like, I don't, you know, it just sort of depends. But what I was gonna say is yes, classics are still being banned. From my personal perspective, it's not less of a concern, but I'm less inclined to be like, I think it's more important that we're talking about the current things that are being banned and why. You know, 1984 is always going to be in there, Catcher in the Rye. It's the same things that people are afraid of, but it's the active targeting of never before heard of authors who happen to be Black and queer and vocal about their identities and trying to give that sort of portal and reflection to young people. I just think that's the bigger conversation, and not to like let that get buried under, you know, Handmaid's Tale is always going to be banned, and that's also not good. I feel like I'm losing my point a little bit, but
No, I see what you're saying. I mean, I think what we see when the classics are being banned is sort of the baseline of fear about content that we've always had in this country. And those books are banned, have been banned, and will keep being banned. But the new bans that account for the fact that newer books are generally the top 10 most banned books, instead of these books that have decades of sort of force behind censoring them, means that the priorities of the people who are enacting the bans have changed. And I think that is worth paying very close attention to.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes?
Does checking out books that frequently get banned sort of help keep them in circulation and help sort of make a point to keep them off the list?
Why, yes, it does. Yeah, so we do use our circulation statistics to influence purchasing. If like a copy of, the Heartstopper books, I have like 17 copies because they're constantly checked out and get really ratty. But obviously, if there's any sort of number, any sort of concrete statistic to support the existence of that book in our space, that's a win. Great question.
All right, one more, if there's anybody. All good? All right, well, this time for real, thank you, everybody. And I will just remind you again about the postcards over there. And the other thing that we're doing right now is that Prison Book Program as a whole has a matching donor this week. So if you would like to buy a book from the Banned Books wish list, just bring up one of the slips of paper from that basket to the register. They'll bring you out the book. Anything that you buy from this basket or on our website over the next week, we tally and the donor doubles that donation. I think, it's always important to remember that providing access to reading in prisons is also crucial because that's a setting where many rights are curtailed, just saying. And this is one way that we can continue to provide a connection between incarcerated people and the rest of the world. So that's also worth doing. So thank you all so much for being here and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.